situation. I
Yes.
have a skin disorder that destroys the pigmentation of the skin. It's something that I cannot help. Okay, but when people make up stories that I don't want to be who I am, it hurts me.
For decades, one rumor followed Michael Jackson everywhere he went. People called him a race traitor. They whispered about secret bleaching rooms and a man supposedly desperate to erase his own blackness. The accusation followed him from magazine covers to late-night jokes to strangers on the street, and it never fully went away, even after he tried to explain it himself, more than once, in front of the entire world. But the real story, the one buried under decades of speculation, tabloid headlines, and secondhand gossip, is stranger, sadder, and far more medically documented than almost anyone realized at the time. And it starts with a little boy from Gary, Indiana, who looked nothing like the man the world would later accuse of hating his own skin. Michael Jackson was born on August 29, 1958, in Gary, Indiana, into a crowded, noisy household filled with music and ambition. Joe Jackson pushed his sons hard. Catherine held the family together with quiet strength. Among 9 children, Michael stood out early, not just for his voice, but for a warm, medium brown complexion that matched the family around him in every photograph taken during those years. Nothing about his skin suggested anything unusual was coming, and nobody in that crowded Gary, Indiana household had any reason to expect otherwise. But the industry he was about to enter would place him under more scrutiny than almost any child in history had ever faced. By age 5 and 6, Michael was already performing alongside his brothers as the Jackson 5, their skin uniformly deep brown under the bright stage lights of Motown. Album covers, television performances, family photographs, all of it told the same simple story, a proud black child from Gary who was about to change the world. There were no patches, no uneven tones, nothing unusual to comment on. As the group exploded onto the charts through the late 60s and early 70s, that consistency never wavered. Nobody watching those early performances could have imagined what was quietly waiting for him just a few years down the road. In 1979, Off the Wall introduced a more mature Michael Jackson to the world, but his skin remained that same familiar medium brown. No one whispered about color, no one speculated about change, because there was nothing yet to change. Even as Thriller was being recorded through 1982, his appearance stayed consistent with the young man fans had followed for over a decade. On the album cover, in early promotional photos, in the first stages of what would become the best-selling album of all time, Michael still looked like himself. Somewhere in that same pivotal year, though, something private had already begun. According to his brother Jermaine's own memoir, 2011, Michael first noticed a small white spot on his stomach around 1982. It was easy to dismiss, easy to cover, easy to ignore under a shirt and stage lights. But Jermaine recognized it instantly because he had seen something almost identical on his own body years earlier. A quiet conversation between 2 brothers who had once shared a childhood bedroom was about to reveal something neither of them fully understood yet, something that would eventually reshape how the entire world saw Michael's face. Jermaine had discovered a white patch on his own thigh as a teenager. A doctor diagnosed it as vitiligo, an autoimmune condition where the body's immune system mistakenly attacks the very cells that produce skin pigment. The doctor reassured him that as long as it stayed small, there was little to worry about. And in Jermaine's case, it did stay small. It never spread. Michael's would not follow the same path. 2 brothers, the same bloodline, the same early warning sign, and 2 completely different outcomes waiting quietly on the other side of that diagnosis. Outcomes that neither of them could have predicted while sitting in that childhood bedroom together. At the time, in 1982, this was still a private matter, still something that could be covered by a shirt or dismissed under bright lights. Michael was at the absolute peak of his creative power, with Thriller about to dominate the entire planet and the moonwalk about to become legend. The single glove would soon appear too, and years later some would claim it was already an attempt to hide something. But in 1982, the public still saw only the Michael they'd always known. Nobody outside the family suspected that his immune system had quietly declared war on his own skin. By 1987, Thriller had rewritten the rules of popular music, and Michael Jackson had become the most photographed human being on the planet. Every detail of his face and hands was magnified 1,000 times over by cameras that never stopped watching. And somewhere beneath the sequins and the spotlight, a few pale patches had begun appearing, most noticeably on the very places the public saw most clearly, his hands and his face. He was about to walk into a Beverly Hills office that would change how the rest of the world understood his appearance for the next 3 decades. Michael was brought to the office of Dr. Arnold Klein, a respected Beverly Hills dermatologist who would go on to treat him for more than 25 years. According to Klein's own later accounts, the moment he examined Michael was immediately striking because it wasn't just pigment loss he noticed. There was a distinctive rash across his face, along with crusting and early hair loss on his scalp. Klein recognized the pattern almost instantly, drawing on years of dermatological experience with patients presenting similar symptoms. A biopsy would soon confirm exactly what he suspected, and it turned out to be only half of what was actually happening inside Michael's body at that moment. The biopsy confirmed discoid lupus erythema, an autoimmune condition that attacks the skin and causes rashes, scarring, and sensitivity. At the same time, Klein was tracking the spreading white patches separately. The two conditions often travel together, both autoimmune, both a case of the body turning against itself. By 1986, after further examination, vitiligo was formally confirmed as well. Now, Michael was managing 2 separate autoimmune conditions at once, privately, while performing at the highest level in front of the entire world night after night. And almost nobody outside his closest circle, his mother, his brothers, and now his dermatologist, had any real idea what was actually happening beneath the surface. Vitiligo is not a choice, and it has nothing to do with vanity. It happens when the immune system mistakenly identifies melanocytes, the cells that produce the pigment that gives skin its color, as foreign invaders and destroys them. The result is irregular white patches that can appear anywhere, often starting on the hands, face, and areas exposed to light, and over time, those patches can spread, merge, and create an uneven, mottled appearance. For a man whose entire career depended on how he looked under harsh stage lights and high-definition cameras, that reality carried an enormous psychological weight he couldn't escape. Dr. Klein later described the progression in blunt terms, saying Michael's case became especially difficult because the speckled patterns spread across his body, particularly his face and hands. Michael began adapting quietly, covering the affected areas with carefully matched makeup, wearing longer sleeves and higher collars, becoming increasingly protective of his hands in public. The single white glove that would later become one of the most iconic images in music history had practical roots buried in this exact period. What started as a way to hide something was about to become a symbol the entire world would misread for decades. By 1987, the transformation was no longer subtle, and the bad era introduced a Michael Jackson who looked noticeably lighter under the lights. It wasn't sudden, and it wasn't a deliberate choice for vanity. It was the visible progression of vitiligo colliding with the practical demands of a global superstar's life. The white patches had spread far enough that makeup matching his natural tone no longer worked reliably, so his team shifted towards lighter foundation to create an even appearance on camera. That single adjustment was about to spark a wave of public speculation nobody on his team could control. According to several people close to Michael during this period, the iconic single glove was originally designed specifically to hide the vitiligo patches that had begun appearing prominently on his hand. What started as a practical necessity became a legendary fashion statement recognized across the entire world. The glove wasn't really about style at all. It was armor, quietly protecting a truth Michael wasn't ready to explain publicly yet. Meanwhile, night after night on a massive stadium tour, that truth was becoming harder and harder to keep hidden under the lights. Between 1987 and 1989, Michael danced with superhuman precision in stadiums packed with tens of thousands of fans across multiple continents. But under the intense stage lighting, the contrast between remaining pigmented areas and the spreading white patches became increasingly difficult to conceal, even with long sleeves, high collars, and carefully planned lighting. Behind the scenes, the emotional toll was heavy on a man who was already a perfectionist about his own appearance. Every single performance was becoming a carefully orchestrated effort to control something that, medically, was completely outside his control, no matter how much preparation or precision he brought to the stage each night. By the late 1980s into 1991, the vitiligo had advanced significantly, covering more than half of his body according to multiple accounts. At that stage, simply darkening the white patches with makeup was no longer practical or effective. The patches were too widespread and too unpredictable to manage that way anymore. Dermatological guidance shifted toward a more aggressive but medically recognized approach for extensive cases like his, one that would permanently and visibly change his appearance in a way the entire world would eventually witness for themselves, whether they understood the underlying medicine behind it or not. When vitiligo already covers more than half the body, doctors sometimes recommend depigmentation therapy, using prescription creams to remove the remaining pigment and create one uniform tone, rather than continuing to fight a losing, patchy battle. These are not casual cosmetic bleaches available over any counter. They are potent, medically regulated treatments reserved specifically for advanced cases exactly like his. Michael began this treatment under medical supervision, a decision made out of necessity rather than any desire to change who he was. But the public wouldn't learn any of this for years, and in that silence, the rumors were about to explode. The public saw a man becoming dramatically lighter with each passing year, and without the medical explanation, they filled in the blanks with something far crueler. Accusations spread that he wanted to be white, that he was ashamed of his race, that he was betraying his own community. These claims hurt him deeply, according to people close to him at the time. Michael kept pushing forward creatively regardless, breaking records and innovating even as the whispers grew louder and more personal around him with every passing year. But soon, the whole world would be watching as he finally decided to address it directly, on camera, for everyone to hear at once. More than 90 million people tuned in to watch Oprah Winfrey sit down with Michael Jackson at Neverland Ranch for his first major interview in years. It became one of the most watched television events in American history. And in that sit-down, Michael finally addressed the rumor that had followed him for nearly a decade. The cameras rolled, the world leaned in, and what he said next would either finally settle the story once and for all, or simply give the rumor mill something new to argue about. Michael told Oprah plainly that he had a skin disorder that destroys pigmentation, something entirely outside his control, and that the false stories about not wanting to be who he was caused him real pain. He explained that his team used makeup to even out the blotches the condition created on his skin. It wasn't a casual admission. It was the most famous entertainer alive laying bare a deeply personal medical struggle in front of the entire planet, live, with no script to hide behind. In that same interview, Michael stated clearly and firmly that he was proud to be a Black American, proud of his race, and proud of who he was. He wasn't running from his identity. He was fighting a disease that had already stolen his natural pigment piece by piece, and the world had somehow turned that private battle into public entertainment. For many people watching that night, it should have been the moment the rumors finally died. Instead, something else entirely was about to happen. The Oprah interview was supposed to end the speculation, and for many viewers who genuinely listened, it did. But the rumor machine had grown too loud and too profitable to simply stop overnight. Tabloids kept running bleaching chamber stories, comedians kept making jokes, strangers on the street kept whispering the same tired accusation, even after Michael had explained the medical truth on live television in front of the largest audience of his career. The gap between what he'd said, plainly and publicly, and what people chose to believe anyway, was about to define the rest of his public life for years to come. By the mid-1990s, with Dangerous and then History, the visual contrast compared to the thriller era was undeniable. Compare the photos side by side and the change looks dramatic. But behind that lighter skin was a man who had spent over 2 decades managing 2 separate autoimmune conditions attacking his body from the inside, conditions that had nothing to do with race or identity and everything to do with an immune system that had turned against itself. What almost nobody outside his medical team fully grasped yet was just how physically vulnerable that transformation had actually left him. By the 2000s, Michael's skin had reached its most dramatic stage, nearly uniform and extremely pale, sensitive to sunlight in a way most people never have to think about. He was rarely seen outdoors with a wide-brimmed hat, dark sunglasses, long sleeves, and often an umbrella, even on overcast days. These weren't eccentric celebrity habits designed for attention. Depigmented skin lacks the natural protection melanin normally provides, and even brief sun exposure could cause real damage. The world saw a man hiding behind fashion, sunglasses, and an ever-present umbrella. The truth was closer to a man quietly protecting a body that had lost its own defenses. For over 2 decades, Michael carried the emotional weight of a public accusation he couldn't fully escape, no matter how many times he explained the medical reality behind it. He remained proud of his heritage throughout, something he stated again and again whenever given the chance. But the constant misunderstanding wore on him in ways that rarely made headlines. Every public appearance became another opportunity for strangers to scrutinize his hands, his face, his neck, looking for proof of something that had already been explained to them years earlier on national television. And then, in the summer of 2009, everything changed in a single afternoon that nobody saw coming. Michael Jackson died at the age of 50. In the days and weeks that followed, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office conducted a full autopsy, and when the complete report was released in early 2010, it delivered a level of medical confirmation that decades of public statements never quite managed to achieve. What investigators found inside his own home was about to make the argument once and for all nearly impossible to dispute. Upon reading to LA County Coroner's Office, their autopsy documented focal depigmentation of the skin, with clear white patches concentrated across his chest, abdomen, face, and arms. Microscopic examination showed a reduced number of melanocytes, and vitiligo was formally listed in his medical history. It matched everything Michael had said publicly back in 1993, and everything Dr. Klein had documented privately for decades before that. But investigators found something else in his home that closed the case even further, something that would finally put the vanity accusation to rest for good. When Michael's home was searched after his death, investigators discovered multiple tubes of monobenzone sold under the brand name Benequin, along with additional tubes of hydroquinone. These are not casual, over-the-counter skin lighteners anyone can pick up. They are potent, medically regulated depigmenting agents reserved specifically for advanced cases exactly like his. Michael began this treatment under medical supervision, a decision made out of necessity rather than any desire to change who he was. But the public wouldn't learn any of this for years, and in that silence, the rumors were about to explode. Vitiligo is not a desire to become white. It's an autoimmune attack on the body's own pigment-producing cells, something no amount of fame, talent, or willpower can simply override. Monobenzone isn't a vanity cream. It's a specialized medical treatment used only when a disease has already claimed most of a patient's natural color. Michael Jackson didn't reject his blackness, and he never once expressed a desire to be anyone other than who he was. He spent nearly 3 decades quietly managing a progressive medical condition that left him no comfortable options, only difficult ones, while the world around him invented a far crueler story to explain what it simply didn't understand yet. Michael Jackson remained proud of his black heritage until the day he died. The disease never took that from him, only the rumors ever tried. What the world once treated as a scandal was actually, according to his own testimony, his doctor's records, and a formal autopsy report, a quiet, decades-long battle against a real autoimmune condition, fought largely out of public view. He kept creating through all of it, kept performing, kept breaking records, even as strangers questioned his identity based on something he never controlled in the first place and never asked for. In the end, the truth was always simpler and sadder than the rumor ever allowed it to be.